that he wouldn't lay a glove on President Trump. And he did say that President Trump lied about him and defamed him. But as far as making some sort of charge that would rise to the level of obstruction of justice, let alone a high crime and misdemeanor, hashtag big fat nothing burger, just as I told you yesterday. We're going to be getting into that in just a second. But first, did you hear about this man who was a hero during the knife attack on that London Bridge? His name is Roy Larner, Larner, Larner. And he loves a southeast London soccer team called Millwall FC. So during the London Bridge attacks, the 47-year-old was stabbed 8 times, wound up in intensive care after fighting the knife-wielding terrorists with his bare hands. When the 3 attackers entered the black and blue steakhouse Saturday night, Larner leaped into action yelling, "F you, I'm Millwall," referring to the Southeast London soccer club he's a fan of. Fighting them, his actions allowed many to escape the London restaurant while he held up the attackers. Here's his account of what happened. "Like an idiot, I shouted back at them. I thought, I need to take the blank out of these blankers. I took a few steps toward them and I said, 'F you, I'm Millwall!' And they started attacking me. I stood in front of them, trying to fight them off. Everyone else ran to the back. I was on my own against 3 of them. That's why I got hurt so much. It was just me trying to grab them with my bare hands and hold on. I was swinging. I got stabbed and sliced 8 times. They got me in my head, chest, and both hands. There was blood everywhere. They were saying, 'Islam, Islam.' And I said again, 'F you, I'm Millwall!'"
You know who I am? I'm Mo Green.
Worst thing I could have done in my carried on my life. Luckily, none of the blows were straight at me or I'd be dead. They kept stabbing me, kept shouting, "Islam, Islam," and I kept saying, "F you, I'm Millwall!"
Do you know who I am? I'm Mo Green.
All right. Now, Comey said that when Trump approached him and said, "Hey, can you let this go? It's a good guy." Comey said, "I interpreted that as a direction to stop the investigation."
Thank you. You have testified that you interpret the discussion with the president about Flynn as a direction to stop the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've testified that the president asked you to lift the cloud by essentially making public statements exonerating him and perhaps others. You refused, correct?
I didn't do it. I didn't refuse the president. I told him we would see what we could do, and then the second time he called, I told him in substance that's something your lawyer will have to take up with the Justice Department.
Mr. Comey, why didn't you say, "F you, I'm Millwall"? Seriously. Why didn't you say, "I am not going to head off in an investigation"? How dare you? "F you, I'm Millwall!"
You know who I am? I'm Mo Green.
Why didn't you tell somebody?
While it was a request that you hoped you did away with it, you perceived it as an order, given his position, the setting, and the like, and some of the circumstances.
Yes.
At the time, did you say anything to the president about that is not an appropriate request, or did you tell the White House counsel that is not an appropriate request? Someone needs to go tell the president that he can't do these things?
Did you tell him, "F you, I'm Millwall"?
I didn't, no.
Okay.
No,
Why?
No, didn't do that.
I don't know. I think, as I said earlier, I think the circumstances were such that I was a bit stunned, didn't have the presence of mind. And I don't know, I don't want to make you sound like I'm Captain Courageous. I don't know whether even if I had the presence of mind, I would have said to the president, "Sir, that's wrong." I don't know whether I would have. Okay. But in the moment, it didn't come to my mind. What came to my mind is, be careful what you say. And so I said, I agree, Flynn is a good guy.
And I got up and I wrote a really strong memo.
So on the cloud, we keep talking about this cloud. You perceive the cloud to be the Russian investigation in general.
Yes, sir.
Right? But this...
All right. So you interpreted Donald Trump saying, "Hey, can you let this thing go," as a direction to stop the investigation. But did he direct you or order you to drop the investigation, Mr. Comey?
Thank you for that. He did not direct you to let it go.
Not in his words, no.
He did not order you to let it go.
Again, those words are not an order.
No. He said, "I hope." Now, like me, you probably
I hope.
Director Comey, did the president at any time ask you to stop the FBI investigation into Russian involvement in the 2016 U.S. elections?
Not to my understanding, no.
Did any individual working for this administration, including the Justice Department, ask you to stop the Russian investigation?
No.
But I interpreted what he said to be a direction to stop the investigation. What did you do about it? Well, I wrote it down. What did you do about it? I told some of my top people. Did you report it? No, because I thought I could handle it. But you interpreted it as a direction. But you weren't told to drop anything.
Thank you for that. He did not direct you to let it go.
Not in his words, no.
He did not order you to let it go.
Again, those words are not an order.
No. He said, I hope. Now, like me, you probably...
That's it? That's it? That's it? Why don't you say, I'm Millwall?
Do you know who I am? I'm Mo Green.
Because he wasn't threatened. He didn't feel that Donald Trump was making some sort of corrupt interference with the investigation. That's why. Otherwise, he would have said, I'm Millwall, I'm Mo Green.
Do you know who I am? I'm Mo Green.
Really? R. James Woolsey, CIA under Bill Clinton.
I don't think it's a smoking gun. It could have been a Josh. I mean, it could have been kidding. There are lots of ways that could be taken. I don't think that's a highly damaging or difficult matter.
So I'm watching CNN, and I'm watching Fox, and I'm watching MSNBC Hee-Haw. And over on MSNBC Hee-Haw, they've already got him impeached. I mean, they already have Mike Flynn as president. And CNN, I've noticed that Jeffrey Toobin is starting to back up a little bit. This was him a few days ago. Listen to this.
Let's just keep this in perspective. There is a criminal investigation going on of one of the president's top associates.
Let's just keep this in perspective. This is really serious. And then today, after Comey, Mr. Toobin
has really zeroed in on what he had just said.
Well, and legally, I think there's an important point, which is obviously Director Mueller is going to investigate this whole issue of obstruction of justice.
The new special counsel.
Correct. But it's not clear that even if he finds evidence that Trump should be indicted, that a president of the United States can constitutionally be indicted. That's never been resolved.
Whoa! That's not what you said the other day, Mr. Toobin.
Let's just keep this in perspective. There is a criminal investigation going on.
Now it's...
has really zeroed in on what he had just said.
Well, and legally, I think there's an important point, which is obviously Director Mueller is going to investigate this whole issue of obstruction of justice.
The new special counsel.
Correct. But it's not clear that even if he finds evidence that Trump should be indicted, that a president of the United States can constitutionally be indicted. That's never been resolved.
That's not what you said the other day. They got nothing. Oh, please. Can we talk about tax cuts now? That all right with you? Infrastructure? That okay? Can we build the wall? I'm Larry Elder. Don't leave town.
Setting fire to the air.
SAGE 888-971-7243. Ed Klein is the former foreign editor of Newsweek. Also a regular contributor to the New York Post. Well-known author. Master's degree from Columbia University, Graduate School of Journalism. We won't hold that against him. He's got a book called Guilty as Sin, Uncovering New Evidence of Corruption and How Hillary Clinton and the Democrats Derailed the FBI Investigation. So I thought we'd ask Ed Klein what he thought of James Comey's testimony today. Ed, what'd you think?
Hey, Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
With you. Well, what I thought was that even though there is absolutely zero evidence of any legal obstruction of justice, nonetheless, for those of us who are in the conservative camp, it's not a good day when the former FBI director comes before Congress and calls the president a liar. It's not a good day, even if he's not telling the truth, because it just makes the president's work harder. Now, I know the president has asked his counsel to come forward and refute what Comey said, and he did. But I have to say that all in all, politically, it's probably not a good day for the president, although there is, in my view, no reason to believe that this has advanced the ball any further in the Democratic hope to get him on obstruction of justice.
Mm-hmm. I view it somewhat differently, but I wanted to hear what you had to say. Were you not surprised, if not shocked, that Comey just kind of dropped it on us, that Loretta Lynch told him not to call the Clinton investigation an investigation, but to use the word, quote, matter, close quote?
No, I wasn't shocked, and I'll tell you why. In my book, Guilty of Sin, I talk about the fact that during the Hillary Clinton email investigation, Loretta Lynch would take her FBI guards, who were armed guards who always were around her, across the street from the Justice Department to the White House and talk to Valerie Jarrett about the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Loretta Lynch was in the tank all the time for Hillary Clinton.
Well, Ed Klein was not shocked, and I remember that being in your book, but I'm telling you, people that were not following this, it seems to me, were gobsmacked by that.
Well, they should be.
Here you have Comey acknowledging that Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, comes to him and tells him, not suggests, tells him to call this a matter, not an investigation. Who told her to do that? Who directed her?
Well, you know who told her to do that. It was Valerie Jarrett on the behest of Barack Obama. That's who told her to do it.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Ed, is Comey is admitting that he leaked a memo to put pressure on the administration to appoint a special counsel. What the hell is that?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you, Larry. I mean, first of all, Comey, talk about lying, lied in front of the Intelligence Committee today when he said that those memos were his because he was a private citizen. That's a lot of BS. Those memos were created while he was the director of the FBI, and therefore those memos belong to the government, not to him. And the fact that he leaked them is his doing exactly what the FBI is investigating now, which is these illegal leaks that are going on all over Washington.
I'm talking to writer Ed Klein. Ed, here's another reason why I disagree with you. First of all, I certainly agree with you that this whole thing is a distraction from Donald Trump's agenda, this whole investigation, clearly. But as far as this day is concerned, it seems to me it took a lot of the air out. You've got James Comey admitting that Trump never directed or ordered him to drop the investigation. He's admitting that President Trump or his staff never asked for the investigation to be dropped. He's admitting all that. He's even admitting that it was his interpretation that Donald Trump was giving him a direction. But, quote, I could be wrong about that. So if you're trying to impeach a president, you've got absolutely nothing. So it seems to me it took a lot of the air out of this. And as proof of that, Ed, here was Jeffrey Toobin, one of the leading, I think, TV scholars, pushing the idea that this is a big deal. Here's what he said a few days ago.
Let's just keep this in perspective. There is a criminal investigation going on of one of the president's top associates, his former national security advisor, one of the most handful of most important people in the government. He gets fired. He's under criminal investigation, and the president brings in the FBI director and says, please stop your investigation.
Right. Okay, so Toobin, in my opinion, Ed, is kind of a bellwether. Here he is just a few moments ago.
Has really zeroed in on what he had just said.
Well, and legally, I think there's an important point, which is obviously Director Mueller is going to investigate this whole issue of obstruction of justice.
The new special counsel.
Correct. But it's not clear that even if he finds evidence that Trump should be indicted, that a president of the United States can constitutionally be indicted. That's
what we call a retreat, Mr. Klein.
I couldn't agree more with you, Larry. And it is a retreat. And Jeff, you know where Jeffrey Toobin comes from. He always comes from the left. However, here's my point, and you and I can disagree or agree on this point. You are completely right that today was to quote Hillary Clinton, a nothing burger, if you will, because all the things that the Democrats were wishing for didn't happen. However, having been in the media as long as I have been and seen what's happened to our American media and how far left it's all gone, I believe that CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, you go on and on and on, except for a few outlets such as talk radio, all going to play this as bad for the president, and that therefore the media interpretation as wrong as it might be, will have a bad effect in the long term, and that if the Democrats should get control of the House in 2018 in the midterm elections, which is a possibility, I would say, then I think they will use today's FBI director's testimony as evidence, even though it isn't, to bring impeachment charges against Donald Trump.
Ed Klein is my guest. He used to be the editor-in-chief of the New York Times Magazine from 1977 to 87, so he knows whereof he speaks. And
I'm not trying to say that I approve of this.
No, I know you
I'm in favor of this. I think it's a lot of hooey myself, but I'm talking about where this country has gone, both in terms of the media, in terms of the Democratic Party. The whole party has only one issue, and that issue is to get Donald Trump.
Ed, did you happen to check out what Dan Baquette, the executive editor of the New York Times, said the other day? He was defending his decision to hire Bret Stephens, the former Wall Street Journal writer, and Stephens' first column was trashing or at least dismissing the science behind climate change.
Yes.
And a number of New York Times subscribers dropped the paper, and Dan Baquette said, and this is almost a verbatim quote, the left as a rule cannot handle serious disagreement. End of quote. I'm sorry, thoughtful disagreement. The left as a rule cannot handle thoughtful disagreement. End of quote. Wow.
He's right about that.
Ed, love you. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Same to you, Larry. Bye-bye.
You got it.
Here's Larry Elder.
Because one of the arguments that people have is, look, there's plenty of places to get news from climate skeptics, if we want to call them that. And they can get it anywhere they want.
Yeah.
So if the New York Times is going to stand for something, well, they should stand for something and embrace the left side of the progressive.
Well, the editorial page
thingy, my Bobby. I just lost all my words. The editor of the New York Times. Embarrassing.
The editorial page does embrace the thingy-mabobby.
Thank you.
But I would argue that it is the job, and again, I'm not the opinion editor. It's like it's not part of my province. But the history of the New York Times, that whole section was not created just to have columnists and writers who agree with the New York Times. It was created after the fall of the Herald Tribune, and the publisher of the New York Times, the original publisher of the New York Times, wanted some of the conservative columnists who worked for the Herald Tribune. So it was created as a forum for different voices. I don't understand how one can actually have an intellectual discourse in this country if you cannot have the opportunity to read thoughtful people with whom you disagree. We're at a moment in the country right now which I think, the left should do some soul searching too, right? We don't want to hear anything that we've long said this about the right. But I think the left, I'm a journalist, but the left as a rule does not want to hear thoughtful disagreement.
And you keep that in mind as we go over the testimony of James Comey today. That was Dan Baquette, the executive editor of the New York Times, saying, as you just now heard him say, quote, the left as a rule does not want to hear thoughtful disagreement, close quote. And what I'm giving you is a thoughtful interpretation of what happened. Alan Dershowitz does not believe that Donald Trump has done anything that suggests obstruction of justice. He's a lefty. Jonathan Turley, the George Washington law professor, does not believe Donald Trump did anything that arises to the level of obstruction of justice, let alone a high crime and misdemeanor. He's a lefty. And already you're seeing Jeffrey Toobin, who, as you heard just days ago, suggested this was a grave, grave matter. And now, even if Mueller finds that everything that James Comey says is accurate, still, that's a whole different question whether or not that's something that's impeachable, let alone something that would be worthy to find the president guilty and then kicked out of the White House. So they got nothing. What you have is a man who wrote down some things because he felt that Donald Trump was trying to, as he put it, shape the direction of the investigation. He didn't report it, felt he could handle it, told some other associates, and that's it. And then he admits that he leaked a memo to put pressure on the White House to appoint a special counsel? That's mind-boggling. Listen to this.
Did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes.
And to whom did you show copies?
I asked, President tweeted on Friday after I got fired that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night.
No, actually what he tweeted was, before Comey starts leaking, he better hope there aren't any tapes. That's what Trump said, apparently anticipating that Comey was going to leak, which he did.
Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so
Now think about that. Think about that. He thought that there might be a tape. Well, if there might be a tape, why do you need to get your side out? The tape will get your side out. No, what he meant was he thought that Trump might have a tape and Trump might alter it or edit it to make him look bad. Because assuming he's telling the truth, he knows what's on that tape. Assuming there's a tape, and there's no tape. But he was scared. He thought there might be a tape. And what he really thought, he didn't say, is that he thought that Trump might alter that tape. Because why else would he be worried? If, in fact, he wrote down exactly what happened, and if exactly what happened is on the tape, why worry? No, he must have been worried that Donald Trump was going to alter the tape, assuming a tape existed.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter.
He asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. It's called a leak.
A friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
Now, is it his job to leak a memo because he thinks the White House needs a special counsel? Is that his job? Where's the investigation? Where are the pitchforks? Can you imagine if this were the Obama administration? And somebody within the Obama administration leaked a memo to put pressure on the Obama administration to do something? What would people be saying right now? You know damn well what they'd be saying.
Larry.
Dan is in Los Angeles. Dan, thank you very much for calling the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. I just wanted to dispel this notion that the right-wing media is putting out there that this somehow has exonerated Donald Trump from any wrongdoing. There's a current investigation still going on. This is just one piece of the puzzle, and it didn't put Mr. Trump into a very good light, seeing how that it has proven that Donald Trump is a liar.
Well, I couldn't disagree with you more. What this does show is that Donald Trump was absolutely right when he said that James Comey better hope that there's no tape before he starts leaking, because James Comey promptly leaked. In fact, you might even make the argument that he might have done the memo in order to leak. And you have James Comey admitting that Donald Trump never directed or ordered him to drop any investigation. The whole point is Donald Trump engaged in obstruction of justice. I don't see it.
Well, he did. I mean, you don't ask your staff to leave the room and insinuate that you should drop the investigation in private.
I did not say that I thought it was appropriate or that I agree with what he did. We're talking about whether or not what he did rises to the level of obstruction of justice. You have somebody leave the room, and the guy who's there says, I felt that I was given a direction to stop the investigation. On the other hand, I was never directed or ordered to stop the investigation. That's all you got? You've got nothing. Nothing, Dan. Nothing.
Once again, this is one piece of the puzzle. There's an entire investigation going on. Flynn has his story to tell, okay, and he's taking the fifth.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you, Dan, that the investigation continues. We'll agree on that. But on 3 occasions, James Comey informed voluntarily, without prompting, that Donald Trump was not the subject of the investigation. And Donald Trump said that, and the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post reported that that was not true, that Donald Trump was never informed by Comey that Donald Trump, was not a target of the investigation. Today, Comey said he did say to Donald Trump on 3 occasions, sir, you are not a target of the investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Comey, when you were terminated at the FBI, I said and still continue to feel that you have provided years of great service to the country. I also said that I'd had significant questions over the last year about some of the decisions you made. If the president hadn't terminated your service, would you still be, in your opinion, the director of the FBI today?
Yes, sir.
Oh, really? Hillary wouldn't have canned you? Are you kidding?
So you took as a direction from the president something that you thought was serious and troublesome, but continued to show up for work the next day?
Yes, sir.
And 6 weeks later, we're telling the president on March the 30th that he was not personally the target of any investigation.
Correct. On March the 30th, and I think again on April 11th as well, I told him we're not investigating him personally. That was true.
Well, the point to me, the concern to me there is that all these things are going.
Okay, so he's not. He told Trump was not a target of the investigation. Now, maybe his other aides might have done something, and I'm not saying they haven't. We're talking about whether or not Donald Trump has done something impeachable. Now, get this. Comey admits that Loretta Lynch told him to stop calling the Clinton investigation an investigation, start calling it a, quote, matter. Can you say obstruction of justice?
At one point, the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me.
What? What?
At one point, the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter.
The same Attorney General that was on that plane with Bill Clinton, that same one? She told you to call the Clinton investigation, to stop calling it an investigation, start calling it a matter? Did that perhaps shape the investigation? Did that provide any, to use Comey's word, direction to stop the investigation of Hillary?
At one point, the Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me.
You made a comment earlier about the Attorney General, previous Attorney General, asking you about the investigation on the Clinton emails, saying that you'd been asked not to call it an investigation anymore, but to call it a matter. And you had said that confused you. Can you give us additional details on that?
Yeah, I'd like to have some additional details on that. Did it rise to the level of obstruction of justice, Comey?
Do you believe this will rise to the obstruction of justice?
I don't know. That's Bob Mueller's job to sort that out.
Thank you, sir.
Hashtag big fat nothing burger. 888-971-SHGE. I am Larry Elder. If you disagree, call me. Do not leave town.